Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So for today, in this crime story, we're going to get in our time machines and we're going to go back to 1982. 1982. Life was a lot different than it is today. All across the world, people were worrying not as much as they are today. Simpler life, but yet there was rampant crime and there were things that are going on, in the political landscape that just weren't the same as we've seen since. On TV, the hit shows were Night Riders, Cheers, Family Ties, and Fame. In the movie theater, E.T. had just come out. An Officer and a Gentleman had just been released. In the political spectrum, Canada had just received complete independence from the Queen Elizabeth when it came to following political agendas for the UK, giving them an outright independence. The longest solar eclipse ever recorded was recorded on July 6th, 1982, lasting 106 minutes. No solar eclipse has ever lasted that long since. The Vietnam Memorial was finally dedicated in Washington, D.C. in 1982. And the Commodore 64 had just been released for home PC use and gaming. That was 1982. Now that we're in 1982 and you know what's going on around you in the world, let's take a look at a crime that here, as of 2020, April, no one has ever been convicted of. Yes, we have a suspect. We've always had a suspect, 2 suspects to be exact, but no one has ever been convicted of. Thank you for joining me today. September of 1982, a 12-year-old girl in Chicago, Illinois, passed away shortly after ingesting an extra-strength Tylenol. That same day, a man died in a hospital after taking the same pill. 2 of his family members followed, dying in the same manner. Over the course of the next few weeks, more seemingly healthy people in the Chicago area dropped dead, suddenly, with no known link. And only thing that they had in common was they had all taken extra-strength Tylenol shortly before their untimely death. As bottles were recalled by Johnson & Johnson, it was discovered that many of the extra-strength Tylenol pills had been laced with potassium cyanide. Once this was made public, Johnson & Johnson issued numerous ads and warning to customers to avoid the product. The company began working feverishly to find a way to seal the packaging to stop any tampering from there on out. James William Lewis of New York City was contacted by Johnson & Johnson, claiming that he was responsible for tampering with the bottles and filling the capsules with cyanide. He had demanded $1 million in exchange for him to stop. He was arrested for the crime, and although he wasn't found guilty, he was still imprisoned for the extortion. The extortion letters that Johnson & Johnson said they had received from James William Lewis were typed out on a very common typewriter that forensically could not be traced back to James William Lewis or his address. They never found any physical evidence that traced him back, but yet he was found guilty of extortion. Even after Johnson & Johnson fortified their Tylenol bottles against tampering, the widespread news of what had happened in Chicago prompted crimes of similar nature around the country. Several more people died from cyanide poisoning found in other over-the-counter medications. The Chicago Tylenol Murders is one of the few true crime stories to spark real change in the country. The quality control of pharmaceuticals increased tenfold, as did the security of the packaging, although the FBI didn't have enough evidence to convict anyone of any of the actual tamperings. It is widely believed that James William Lewis and his wife were indeed responsible for these crimes. January 11th, 2010. The sole suspect in the 1982 Tylenol murders that left 7 dead said in a bizarre interview Sunday that anyone who believes he is responsible is wrong, and he says he thinks adamantly and daily about all the victims of each and every one of these murders. Just days after he was ordered by the Massachusetts court to hand over DNA and fingerprint samples, James Lewis, 62, appeared on local television programming Sunday night and defended his innocence and promoted his new novel, ironically titled Poison. Asked by the Cambridge community television host Roger Nicholson, who had previously interviewed Lewis back in 1986, if he was willing to confess to being the actual person who poisoned the Tylenol capsules, he said, "The only thing I can say to you is that you're totally delusional," said Lewis, who spent most of the interview talking about his new book, which he says is a fictional account of the poisoning deaths in the Midwest cities. No one has ever been charged in the Chicago area Tylenol poisonings, but Lewis has always remained under suspicion. After the murders, he served 12 years in prison for writing the extortion letter to Johnson & Johnson, which was forensically determined later on to never have come from anything that Mr. Lewis had. After his release in 1995, he moved from Illinois to Massachusetts. In February 2009, his Cambridge, Massachusetts home was raided by the FBI agents, and were seen leaving with boxes of evidence and an older Apple computer. Lewis said in this weekend's interview that even though he has nothing to do with these murders, he still thinks about the victims, as he always has since the day that he was brought up, and they said that he was responsible for it. "I feel for those people every day, like I have for the last 28 years, said Lewis. Lewis's attorney refused to return any messages or make a formal statement upon the actual seizure of evidence from Lewis's home. A representative for Johnson & Johnson told local news reporters and beat writers for the Associated Press that the company is referring all questions to authorities. James Lewis's extortion letter landed him in jail for 12 years. In Sunday night's interview, Lewis said that he had known about the intent of the letter, but did not write the letter himself, nor did he send it. "I never dreamed it would have any type of impact upon the victims," Lewis told Robinson. "If I had, I never would have gone forward to the police or admitted that I knew about the letter." Press releases widely circulated at the time said that the police had asked for a subpoena for DNA evidence and fingerprints. Lewis declined to give fingerprints or DNA evidence to the FBI, and no such actual warrant or subpoena was ever issued in the case. Lewis and his wife Leanne were ordered by the Middlesex Superior Court in Massachusetts last week to comply with a subpoena from the DuPage County, Illinois grand jury and submit DNA and fingerprints after he has been released from prison for the extortion charge. According to the Daily Herald in Chicago, new scientific technology available to analyze the smudges on one of the original Tylenol bottles could help establish a link between Lewis and his crimes. The paper quoted an ex-state police officer involved in the original investigation, whose name was not mentioned because he agreed to speak with only on a guaranteed anonymity, said the advances in DNA and fingerprints technology make the smudge evidence relevant today. In addition to the extortion letter, Lewis remains a person of interest for the FBI investigation in several other tampering cases and poisoning cases. But the FBI has still refused, as of 2010, to acknowledge what those cases may be. So the question that we all must ask ourselves, after all these years, from 1982 to 2010, why hasn't the FBI, the state police, the local police, or anyone international where these crimes have taken place? There was poisoning cases in Canada, in the United Kingdom, and in France. Copycats, most likely. Why was James William Lewis never convicted of anything? For 12 years they had him in prison, where they could have gotten his DNA and his fingerprints off of the records for his incarceration. But yet they never did. And in 2010 they went and got a subpoena finally, after all these years, to make him and his wife comply with going in and actually giving DNA and fingerprints. Still, no arrest for James William Lewis or his wife, Leanne. The evidence isn't there. And even though technology has advanced today, it still hasn't advanced to the point where they can make an arrest in this case and actually convict him of this crime. Again, in all these poisoning cases, not a single person has ever been convicted of the copycats or the original case from 1982. Some people have been rumored, but no one has ever been convicted of it. Thank you for joining me today. And you stay safe out there.